record on this computer. So just so you know, it is recording. And I'm going to share my screen. Files. All right. Sorry. We had this all ready to go. Stacy, do you have the PowerPoint handy? Are you able to share it?
Sorry, I was muted. This is all very great, isn't it?
We're so organized, sitting in the meeting all by myself, waiting for everyone.
There you go.
Awesome, thank you. So now I can officially get into the groove and welcome everyone. So welcome to Preservation Connecticut's Talking About Preservation, our series of noontime chats. We've been doing these chats for the last few weeks since we are all stuck at home, observing social distancing, but yet very eager to continue our mission of reaching out to folks out in the field and chatting with you and talking about preservation issues. So I'm really pleased that so many of you have tuned in to join us today. Can you advance? There we go. So Preservation Connecticut, we are a statewide nonprofit historic preservation organization, and we were established in 1975 by a special act of the Connecticut General Assembly. And we are statutory partners with the State Historic Preservation Office, and we are their nonprofit arm to promote and protect and preserve the historic resources of Connecticut. And on the call today, we have some staff members. I'm Jane Montanaro, the Executive Director. Our circuit riders, Brad Scheid, Mike Farino, and Stacy Vero are on the call. And we also have Renee Tribert on the call, one of our other staff members. And we have one of our partners from the State Historic Preservation Office, Mary Dunn, on the call as well. Next slide.
Sorry.
There it is. So as I said, we're using this program to help continue our mission. Our role is to be out in the field and in communities and helping you preserve and protect your historic resources. And we're using this forum to introduce you to other preservation experts and other partners and grant recipients and advocates, everyone that we do work with. We're using, each session to try to focus on one element of our work and bring the community together and bring the conversation together in this noontime chat. So today's episode is about grant funding. And that's one of the big questions that we always get. Where's the money to help me preserve this historic resource? So I'm going to turn turn it over to our circuit writer, Mike Farino, who can get us started on the conversation of where's the money.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to briefly go through both Preservation Connecticut's grant programs and the SHPO's grant programs. Of course, Mary Dunn from SHPO is here, so Mary, feel free to add any information. And then, I guess at the end, I'll be happy to take specific questions if you're interested in any of the programs. So the first one for the slide that you see here, we call it our Maintenance and Repair Grant. Since 2013, we've awarded over $600,000 in capital improvement grants. That's a question I get a lot. So capital grants are for building projects, restoration, whereas planning money is for soft costs such as architectural or engineering fees. This program is funded through the Community Investment Act and the State Historic Preservation Office, and it's for religious organizations with historic buildings listed on the state or national register. Right now, the grant is for up to $15,000, and it's a matching grant, which means for every dollar that an applicant applies for, they must contribute $1 to that project. You can see there's a little bit on the time frame. So they're funded annually. We have a pre-application process that you can keep an eye out for on our website or on our social media. We can go from there. And there's a note at the bottom here, but this is true for all grant applications, is that we strongly encourage people to contact circuit riders or contact someone else at Preservation Connecticut well before they're interested in applying and setting up a site visit, especially if we haven't been out to your building. Okay, Stacy, you want to? Yeah. The next funding source, it's also a capital grant, so for restoration projects or renovation. It's the 1772 Foundation Maintenance and Repair Grant. So since 2010, so 10 years, we've partnered with the 1772 Foundation, which is a Rhode Island-based preservation organization that offers capital improvement grants throughout the Northeast. This one's specifically for 501c3 nonprofits and organizations with historic buildings. Schools, municipalities, and religious organizations are not eligible. There are some exceptions if the town is, if the building is owned by the town but is occupied by the nonprofit that holds a long-term lease, or if there's some kind of partnership between the town and a nonprofit. But if you're interested in that, we could answer more specific questions about that. Again, it's a matching grant 1-to-1, and it's up to $10,000, and the time frame is similar to the M&R. Instead of a pre-application, there's a letter of interest that must be submitted if you're interested in that program. And our final funding source is called a technical assistance consultancy. This is both for nonprofits and municipalities. This is a program where we can directly hire an engineer, architect, or some other type of professional to come assess an issue with the building, particularly if there's a safety issue or something that needs to be sorted out very quickly. So it's not really a grant program so much as it is, well, technical assistance program. Like I said, these are generally for emergencies, and they don't really replace large-scale engineering or architectural studies. Go ahead, Stacy. The next grant program is through the SHPO's office, and this is Mary Dunn's program. So this is planning money called the Survey and Planning Grant, and this could cover architects and engineering fees that may be associated with a nonprofit or municipality's building. The buildings must be listed on the State Register of Historic Places or the National Register. You can see here that it will also cover soft costs associated with some other types of activities, historic resource inventories, the nominations themselves to put a building on the state or national register, conditions assessment, feasibility studies, specs for construction. Yeah, and even toolkits and brochures. Sorry, Stacy. This is another capital program. This one we get an inquiry about quite a bit. So it's called the Historic Restoration Fund, also through the SHPO office. It's again a one-for-one matching grant for up to $100,000 for buildings listed on the state or national register for nonprofits and municipalities. And it covers a wide range of project types. You can find more information on the SHPO's website, or you, of course, can ask us for more details about that. And there is an easement associated with this program, which I get a lot of questions about. So if there is a question about that, I'd be happy to answer it later on. And I think,
you, Mike.
Okay, yep.
Thanks, Mike. And I just wanted to comment to all of our listeners out there, before you get stressed out about all the different programs and where do I begin, and now I have a million questions. That is precisely why we have 3 circuit riders. Our circuit riders are here to assist you with your figuring out what it is you need and where the resources are and how to get you started, and to help you navigate the whole course from preliminary applications to full applications to the bid process when you actually get a grant, and even helping you wrap it up with your final reports and everything, and your reporting to SHPO and all of that. So no need to stress. Preservation Connecticut is here to help, and that's what our circuit rider team is here for. So now I'd like to turn it over and show you some of the grants in success stories. We've had a great relationship with the Fairfield Museum and History Center, and Mike Jehle, the executive director there, is here to talk with you about the grants that they've been recipients of. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you, Jane. Hi, everybody. So thanks for inviting me to talk to you all tonight, and I'm happy to answer any questions afterwards. Just to let folks on the call know a little bit about the Fairfield Museum. We have a modern museum facility, but we also own ourselves that building that's in the lower right corner of the PowerPoint there. It's a mid-18th century residence called Ogden House. We also have a relationship with the town of Fairfield, a management relationship for 5 additional historic properties, largely on the town green, that we oversee their restoration, public access, and use as an interpretive use. So we cover the gamut, I think, with a lot of relationships that different organizations have in historic preservation. And I guess I'd start by just saying and reiterating what Jane said. Preservation CT, the State Historic Preservation Office, all these folks are really there to help you succeed. And I think that getting them involved early in the conversation, getting them involved early in your planning is really tremendously helpful. And I think the most important thing is, if you are a steward for a historic property, the tendency sometimes is to want to address immediate problems and to whether it's a leak or rot or any sort of range of preservation issues, it is to sort of focus on that initial problem. I would really encourage you, wherever possible, to step back and to really take the time to formulate a plan. I think what's helped us tremendously is working with SHPO and their survey and planning funding to really develop a stewardship plan for all these properties that we are responsible for. What that does is that allows you to work with a preservation architect, look at what are some of the perhaps more substantial or underlying problems that your properties may be faced with, and really set up, I think, a much more logical series of steps for how you go about fixing those. And I think it those planning processes are really helpful because it does force you to kind of think about, what's the use of this property? How are we going to solve various questions about preservation and access and public use and interpretation and things like that. And so while it may present a year or two delay on fixing something that you feel urgent to fix, I think if it's at all possible, I really urge people to have that plan in place. I think in our instance, with each of the properties we've been working on, we hired a preservation architect to really develop the stewardship plan for us. So we had a clear roadmap for how we fund each step of the process. I think I'd also urge folks, and again, it could be part of this planning process, to really kind of think and understand what your community is interested in the property too. I think those of us who are organizational stewards for historic properties often get very fixated about the property and what it means to us and how we feel it should be interpreted and how we feel it should be utilized and things like that. And we forget that a community's use and a community's kind of approach to your historic property is a very evolving relationship. And understanding what the community is interested in learning and the stories that the community is interested in being engaged with can really help with those funding requests down the line. So for example, we may, and we've all fallen into this trap, we may get fixated about got to get the right furniture and the right, things for this historic room. And we get very focused on kind of the weeds of making a historic property look great, that we may lose touch with what people are interested in connecting with, what the stories are behind this historic property. What are the things that are really relevant today? I mean, I think, look around you, right? Our understanding of history and how it informs who we are as a community is constantly changing, sometimes in very profound and substantive ways. And so, again, as part of the planning, take time to, whether it's a survey or a few sort of listening meetings, take time to understand what your community is interested in, because they will be important advocates to your preservation efforts and your funding requests down the line. They'll be writing letters of support. They'll be writing other ways that can kind of help support your funding requests. And I think along those same lines, I'm a big believer in partnerships as far as those communities. And so think about who's in your community and what are the ways that other organizations might be able to have a role in your plan for your property. So for example, in Fairfield, we have two big universities. We've used graduate students at various programs to drill into certain preservation questions, or to use some of our properties we've worked with the education department at Fairfield U to look at ways that historic properties can be used for alternative, non-traditional education. And so all these people become your partners in your funding applications. And so when it comes time to apply to SHPO or to Preservation CT or the 1772 Foundation, they come on as your advocates, and you come together not only with a well thought out plan that you're asking for a sequential step in, but you're coming together with people who are part and parcel of your approach. I think, from our standpoint too, I'm a big believer in triangulating the wide range of funding sources that are out there. So, Mike did a great job in touching with all the ones at SHPO and at 1772 Foundation, but there's also Connecticut Humanities. There's also other organizations that should really be part of an interlocking template of funders that will deal with certain aspects of this. So, you may work with SHPO on developing a plan and surveying your historic property and understanding what's involved in a stewardship plan. Then you may be going to 1772 or to Preservation Connecticut to start to do some necessary repair work. But you should also not forget other partners like Connecticut Humanities who can be part of developing an interpretive plan for that. So I guess look holistically at the funders out there and how they can help a sort of broad approach to moving your property in the direction that you feel like it needs to go. I'm also, and Mary, I'd welcome your input on this. I know that in the past, SHPO has these certified local government grants that are set aside to go to qualified governments in Connecticut to help with preservation issues. And I know often in the past they have gone sort of wanting. And so there's a great opportunity there for partnerships with, if you perhaps share ownership or if you share stewardship with a historic property, or in a planning effort, there are opportunities there to work with your local government to apply for that stream of funding through the certified local government stream to kind of help in this overall strategy as well. Mary, are those still being offered?
Yeah, they are, and that's a good point to make, because if a municipality is a certified local government, they don't always necessarily have to own the resource, but they can partner with the local historical society or a local nonprofit, because we think that if it's in the interest of the municipality that a resource be developed or restored, then that is enough of a basis to give a grant to the town that might not, I don't know how to put this, it doesn't benefit something that's owned by them, but they have a public interest in the disposition of a property. And I think we did give a CLG grant to Fairfield to help with the planning of the green, on which a lot of your properties sit. Is that correct?
Well, actually, they're municipally owned properties, and so right, we exactly. So we have this unique sort of management agreement with our local government over a number of these historic properties that sit on a historic landscape, and so what Mary's referring to is that it's still a very active civic landscape, right? The government buildings are still there. There's churches and schools still there, and so we did a very successful landscape study to see how could we both accommodate and make space for historic preservation and for allowing public access to this, yet still allow for these multiple uses to take place. A lot of these things are a long process, right? I mean, you do this planning, and sometimes you have to wait for these partnerships to move along. I know in Fairfield here, for example, we've had a complete changeover in government. So in many ways, we've gone back a few steps in our progress towards some of these plans. But I think, it gets back to what I was saying before about the value of planning, is that sometimes these things aren't, accomplished in the timetable that we would all wish, but it is a long game. And I think that having a plan and having kind of that long-term vision helps you find opportunities for incremental progress. And I think there are, for those historic properties that are facing emergency issues, there are funds available for kind of addressing something emergency if there's a hole in the roof or something like that. But I think in most instances, we all have some time to build these relationships with our funders, to have these conversations, and to really invest in working with an architect, a preservation architect, on developing these stewardship plans and understanding where there might be hidden issues and hidden challenges that we're not thinking about. So I'm just a big believer in that, because it makes it easier for us, like we did, I think last year. We had a small incremental project that we had to do at Ogden House that was part of this plan, and it was really the last bit of work that we had to do. But it's been I think we did the historic building study back in the 80s. So it's been a long process, but those plans can have a long life and help you kind of chip away at the progress. What else can I talk about, Jane? Anybody have any questions? I don't mean to just keep babbling on. Happy to answer any specific questions.
If you have questions, you can raise your hand or put it in the chat or unmute yourself.
Oh, I don't chat. Okay. I think that I think the thing too for us all to remember is that this is not always a perfect process, and that and here again, that's where just taking a little time to plan, it can be helpful. And I know for a lot of us who are small organizations, planning sometimes seems like a luxury and time that we just don't have. But it's just particularly with issues of historic preservation where you're dealing with properties and landscapes that are so old, it really behooves you to try to find space and invest that time in doing it. I think that, otherwise, in the absence of that, you end up sort of just chasing all these kind of quick emergency issues all the time. And funders, don't necessarily like to see that. I think that they understand that, we all have immediate issues, but, they want to see that we're thinking a little bit more deeply about what the long-term end game is for these properties. I also
Planning,
think,
so,
I'm sorry.
I just wanted to say planning is so important for all organizations, but particularly if you're in an organization that doesn't have a paid staff. If
Right.
you're just a volunteer board, you have these documents that stay in the organization, in the institutional memory, so a new group, a new board can come in and continue the work that was established before.
Right. Well, and SHPO and Mary are fantastic partners in that planning process. I mean, this is one of the important things that they do, and can work with you on finding a way to make it work for your particular organization and its capabilities. I think also as when it does come time to writing applications for funding support, having been a reader of applications for many, many, many years, having the clarity that a plan brings is really helpful so that you can say, this is what the plan pointed out. This is what we've done so far. This is what we propose to do next. It gives a certain linear clarity to your application that readers really like to see. I think if you're flailing to justify something that sounds confusing, it's hard for a reader to really understand what the overall benefit is.
Great. Well, what would you say was your greatest challenge in all of this?
It's been interesting because I think, each property sort of has its own peculiar challenges. I think Ogden House, which is the property that we happen to own as an organization, has really been the easiest because we began 15 years ago working with a stewardship plan we had developed to start to tackle some serious issues. And we've been able to do it in a sequential and organized way. I think the properties that we work with the municipality on have been more challenging. We were fortunate to get both through some bonding from the state and from some money from SHPO. Actually, I don't think we got money for SHPO for that, but from some other funders to do a major project on Burr Mansion, which is a historic property owned by the municipality that we manage in Fairfield. Working with the town government to oversee the work that was done there was very, very complicated because the town had all sorts of bidding guidelines and all sorts of guidelines. The state had all sorts of guidelines. And so it can become a complicated process to get the work done. And oftentimes those bidding and contracting and construction requirements add time and often money to the project. But again, it's taking the long game, right? It's, while this project maybe didn't achieve everything you wanted to, it was significant progress toward the ultimate goal. And I think that, it's, as somebody who's sort of ADHD and always wants to get something done, it's something that I always have to kind of take a deep breath and want to remind myself of, that sometimes you do take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And particularly when dealing with partners or dealing with municipalities where government changes and hurdles crop up that you weren't anticipating, it can sometimes feel frustrating. But I think if you can say, all right, well, we have to invest in reinventing this relationship and getting this progress, moving forward. So, I think that in our instance, it's been an interesting process, but I think that, having worked in Massachusetts in historic preservation for many years, Connecticut really has some wonderful resources through SHPO and through Preservation CT and others to the Circuit Rider program is just amazingly unique in many ways, because you have really knowledgeable, passionate people who understand the challenges that we face as small organizations, and also can help you navigate those processes. So I'm a big fan of involving all of those partners early on in your process.
Great, thanks, Mike.
Sure.
Your site is such a wonderful example of all of the programs that are available and the ideal way to execute those programs. And I love how you were really emphasizing getting the community involved. That is such an important issue, that the resource has to be a living, vital part of the community today, and also provide a connection to the past. So making sure that you get plenty of community input and that it's a resource for the community to use on a daily basis is really critical.
Right. Well, I think that, if we don't maintain our relevancy, then, we lose our most fundamental basis of support of the community. And I think that community's interests and needs evolve. And I think it behooves us all to listen to those and to understand ways that history can continue to inform, and the stories and historic properties can continue to inform how we identify ourselves and how we grow and how we change as communities. I mean, these are relevant structures, right? It may be tempting to say this is this sort of frozen piece of architecture in time, and we just want to preserve it in this little kind of frozen moment. But these are still living structures. These are still living organizations and buildings that continue to tell us stories and can continue to facilitate new stories. And so, I think that they're really exciting to work with, because I think that historic buildings can, be a wonderful touchstone into some important topics.
Absolutely. I was just thinking, Mary, if you're with us, there were some recent changes that the SHPO made to the grants.
Yeah. I wanted to mention, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I wanted to mention that I can't find my camera, so I can't turn on my camera. Sorry, I did something weird to my screen. But in Mike Farino's presentation, he mentioned the match has been waived in consideration of economic difficulties posed by COVID-19, and that is effective through the December HPC meeting. So, and that applies only to survey and planning grants and partners in preservation grants. It can't apply to HRF grants because by statute those require a match. But if anybody's planning to submit a survey and planning grant, you can get up to $20,000 without a match required. And then we also have our temporary stewardship relief grants that are grants of up to $1,000, and those are for utility costs. Just send in your bills, your electricity, gas, insurance, security. There's an application process, but it's online, and we're going to try to turn around a payment to you specifically to help you pay bills that are related to stewarding a designated historic resource, something that's listed on the state or national register of historic places. So those are two new things. There is a program cap on that of $200,000. So we are giving out grants until we run out of that funding. I think that's it.
Great, thank you, Mary.
Sure.
Tara has raised her hand and has a question.
Yes, hi everybody. I'm feeling shy today, so I wasn't going to go on video. There's been a lot of talk about nonprofit and municipalities, and I'm coming from a very different perspective as inheriting a historic home that my family has been in for a ridiculously long time by most people's standards. And I'm just wondering, do I need to form a nonprofit to take advantage or to begin the process? I'm kind of overwhelmed, so any information is welcome.
Sure. So I'm glad you joined us, Tara. We get this question a lot from homeowners, property owners. Grant programs are typically only available to nonprofits and municipalities, but we do have a homeowners tax credit program that the state administers, and that was going to be the focus of our Where's the Money talk next week. So that program is administered by the State Historic Preservation Office, and it is just for homeowners. So we can, talk to you offline about how that would apply to you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome. There was a question posed earlier about are organizations required to be a 501c3 in the state of Connecticut? And I know for the state grants and for the Preservation Connecticut grants, which are funded through state money, yes, they are required to be a 501c3 in Connecticut. Our partnership program with the 1772 Foundation, they operate in a number of states, so it may be possible to do it differently with the 1772 Foundation. That's something we'd have to do on a per case basis with them. We have time for more questions if anyone had anything.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I think that may have been my question. I wrote that question or something similar to it, and probably too long in the sign up for this. The situation we're in, I was the last person to run the boat building school within Mystic Seaport. So I ran a sort of a maritime skills school within Mystic Seaport back when that existed, and it unfortunately does not anymore. And with what's happened to Mystic Seaport lately, it doesn't seem like that's ever going to happen again. My wife and I had to spend the last few years in New Hampshire taking care of an elderly parent, and while there, we started our own school. So it's based on boat building, but it grew to whatever the market had demand for. So it's become what we call a heritage craft school. We're now in the process of trying to move back to Connecticut. This is, I think, where our market is. This is where my head has been for all this time. So we've been looking for an interesting place to do this. And what we have found that we think is absolutely ideal is also monumentally frightening. It is huge. It's a former mill complex, so it's 16 acres, multiple buildings, 90,000 square feet, including a building that was built in 1825, the Brownell Mill in Moodus, Connecticut. So we are not in it yet, and what we're trying to do is figure out what it is that we're getting into before we jump into it. So yeah, that was my question. And, we incorporated our school as an LLC in New Hampshire. And we are just now trying to figure out if we can stay that and take advantage of these things that are offered only to municipalities and 501c3s in other ways, or if we really should be concentrating right now on getting that 501c3 status. I was very interested to hear the idea of partnering with the municipality. I think that's something that Moodus, Connecticut would be very interested in, having the site preserved for a purpose that they like. I think they're very worried about what's going to happen to this mill complex in the middle of their town. So that's very interesting. Yeah, but still wondering about the possibility of partnering with other 501c3s. Instead of becoming one ourselves?
That is certainly an option. And as Mike emphasized too, partnerships are important. And I think you would definitely want to develop as many partnerships as you could. Do you plan on using the entire complex yourself?
No.
Okay.
And you're right, figuring out what to do with it. Because I'm still involved in mostly historic maritime trade things. What am I saying? I worked at a company for a long time restoring yachts. And there's always a need for storage. So my immediate idea was just 20th century factory buildings could generate passive income through boat storage. After that, though, we've been talking to multiple people who, well, I guess the idea is what we're talking about, or what I was first thinking about, would be non-programmatic use of the space. It would be absolutely commercial use of the space in order to support what it is that we want to do. I very much like the idea of using the space, if we could, to generate income, but also to do something to mission. So, you know, for example, there is a hydroponic grower looking for space, and there's an absolutely perfect place to do that within the mill complex. So, you know, if we could use the whole site for giving space and opportunity to other organizations that would kind of be to our mission, all the better. But yeah, specifically for the school, I'm most interested in the historic 1825 or 1844, whichever it is, mill building that's at the front of the site, which is in some respects very good, and the foundation of it, or the cellar floor of it, is very, very bad, and needs pretty immediate help. And of course, because of COVID, we've been unable to talk to a lot of the people that we would ordinarily be talking to first, including the owner. The owner of the place has just gone missing. I have a friend who's already renting space from him, and he hasn't been able to pay his rent for the last few months because he can't get a hold of the owner. So we are a little bit out ahead of ourselves, but again, just trying to figure out a game plan, like you said, writing a plan now for what could happen if we got ourselves into this.
Yeah, that's a
Excuse
full
me.
bag. Yeah, Renee, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Wade, this is Renee. We've emailed a little bit.
Yes.
And I just was wondering how you're getting along with resolution of the state register listing, and whether in fact that building, have you been able to ascertain, Mary, there's some confusion about which building associated formerly with the Brownell Mill complex is actually listed on the state register from the 1969. And so I just was wondering, Wade, had you gotten an opportunity to speak with Jenny about that, or?
No, I wrote up what we had come up with, which is not a particularly easy thing to write out. But anyway, I wrote that up and sent that back to Jenny, and I haven't heard back since then. No.
Okay, okay. Because as I'm sure you've been hearing, a lot of this funding that we're talking about is going to be contingent upon whether or not there's a designation for the buildings. So.
Right, and that's to say a little bit more about that. The inclusion into the state register was at the very beginning of the state register, and that was based on a Habshair survey from 1968. And in that survey, which is just a single piece of paper thing, the description is of the Brownell Upper Mill and that site, and the history of that site. But the actual photograph that's on the piece of paper and the little hand-drawn map are of what they call the Smith Mill, what for a long time was the Brownell South Mill, which is now owned by Dutch Oil, which was actually built in the 1860s. So it seems as though there was some confusion about which building they should have been looking at in 1968. And as a result of that, well, it seems pretty clear that the Dutch Oil Smith Mill 1860, the lower mill, is listed, but we're not sure where that puts the upper mill, which we believe the core of the building is the original twine mill in Moodus from 1825.
Right, right. And that lower mill was actually a later adjunct to it, and began as a different mill.
It was a different company that built it in the 1860s and operated for about 15 years before Brownell bought it. They ran it as what they called their lower mill. And then in the early 2000s or thereabouts, the Brownell company sold it to Dutch Oil. And Dutch Oil was completely unaware that there was a listing. So it was just absolutely new news to them that they had a listed building.
So anyway, Mary, that's one of the issues that obviously Wade would like to resolve.
Sure, okay. I can mention that to Jenny, see what's going on.
Wade, this is Stacy Vero, the circuit writer. One resource you may want to look into, pending listing, of course, is Joe Simolis is the planner in Middletown, and he oversees a mill building that is actually owned by the municipality. And he might just be a good contact to chat with. And I can send you his information if you'd like.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he has a lot of different tenants in there, and it just would be a good place to start just to get an idea of what they have done in Middletown.
Okay. Yeah. We're good friends for quite a long time with Wendy Berry of the, what's her group called? The Southeast Connecticut Cultural Coalition. And so we met with her, and she gave us a sort of list of converted mill buildings with multiple tenants, you know, things like the Velvet Mill in Stonington. Start to take a look at what might look like.
And I can, if you want to, I can double check with some of my contacts, Wade, to see, I've got one in particular in mind, to see if, he'd be willing to talk to you. He is a multi-tenant building, and he's actually been working, doing rehab work on it himself. So I'll double check. He's usually terribly amenable and has enjoyed, talking to others about your shared experiences. Well, not that you're in it yet, but
right.
I'll do that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And you may have said this already, Wade, but have you had conversations with the town at all about what they would like to see there, what you're proposing there?
I have not. The Wendy, her associate director happens to live in East Haddam, and it's a woman that's been there for a long time and knows all the players. And she gave me two people that are within the town sort of planning and zoning community who would be a good place to start. Sort of the best people to get as your allies before proceeding. So that's where I am now, trying to get a response. There are so many people dealing with businesses that are going out of business that I think people are happy about the idea of business coming to Connecticut, but they can't necessarily dedicate the time to it that they would like.
Good. Well, sounds like you're doing all the right first steps, and I'm glad that you reached out to us, because Preservation Connecticut would like to assist you in your foray into this mill owner project. This is exactly what we do, and Renee Tribert is our mills making places contact, and so I'm glad you've made contact with her first, and the circuit riders also help us in facilitating all of these moving parts that need to be put together.
I contacted Renee first, I think, and then was referencing other things I'd seen about the mill in various places. And then after I talked to her, I realized that she was the author of all those other things that I was referencing.
Maybe not the author, but the organizer.
Okay.
Great. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
We have a few minutes left if anyone else had a question.
Hello, you can't see my face. I'm Suzanne up in the corner, and I've come to the meeting late, so I'm figuring that you're probably already wrapping up. But is there any follow-up on this, since I've missed most of it, that we can keep in touch with everybody?
Sure. We are recording this, so we can send that to you so you can watch it.
Okay.
And just contact us directly. We are here to help. And if you had a question you wanted to start with now, we can.
I'm up in Willamantic, and we have a redevelopment head who's very aggressively trying to get a whole bunch of buildings taken away. And, it's the whole movement of box stores are better than historic buildings, and demolition by neglect, and all that other stuff that's going on. It's discouraging as somebody who moved here from Fairfield County, because I like the picturesque area, to see, the whole strip malls encroaching into the downtown area. If it's old, it's ugly, that kind of thing going on. So, this is why I wanted to join this conversation. We've had an incident where we we did stop the demolition of a historic building in the villagey area of Wyndham. But no one has picked up the building. Now that it can't be developed, nobody's buying it. And, you know, so the funding is a frustration on that. So that
Is that the Wyndham Inn?
Yeah, the Wyndham Inn, yeah. So it's just sitting there, and again, it's going to be a case of demolition by neglect. It'll eventually fall. It's got one damaged wall. What happened was there was a fire escape put there, probably sometime early 20th century, and in putting the fire escape, it damaged one of the support beams. So now you've got a brick wall that is caving out. And, you know, and it's also the question of having historic buildings that don't have enough parking. So how do you repurpose it if you're not going to be provided with enough parking for people to be able to go to whatever you repurpose the building to be, you know? And, you know, there's all kinds of questions going on with that. So,
I understand from one of our earlier chats that there is a preservation organization that just was founded around this building. So I think we have been in touch with someone, and we certainly would like to be and, you know, participate in getting that organization established and helping you with a plan and what to do with that building. That is important.
Yeah, and it's just a frustration to see buildings that have visual character being taken away and replaced with things with, you know, it's just concrete blocks and big ugly signs. And that's all that goes there. Or it's development. You know, having moved here from Norwalk, you know, and watching the uncontrolled changes down in Norwalk. For instance, a friend of mine who has a house right off the green was showing me photos of a Victorian building that now has been expanded to a point that it just looks like a mishmash, and it's all for housing that is not affordable in anybody that I know since. You know, it's been a frustration all along for me. Anyway, so that's sort of my concerns. I've missed your actual discussion, so, you know, I just would like to, since I've missed that, be able to participate in fresher ones, you know, newer ones, if they're going to be ongoing, and you know, see what you talked about before, if I can see the video of what you just talked about.
Yep.
So.
And I think that we will be trying to organize with the 501c3 that founded to help, you know, get some planning.
That's good.
Help you with feasibility studies, what to do with the building, and how to get organized. That's our role, and, you know, helping you build those partnerships as well.
Okay, great.
So that's the job for the circuit riders.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Suzanne. It's just about 1 o'clock. Last chance for a question. So next week, we're going to talk about the Historic Homes Tax Credit. So that is, you know, to help our stewards of private homes. And I know that there are many out there that need to have some assistance in being the stewards of these remarkable assets for our state. And so we're happy to provide some information about that. And I thank everyone for being here today, and remind you all to please be a member of Preservation Connecticut. Not only are your dollars important to our organization and continuing our work, but also having you as one of our constituents and someone that we can call on to help us in your community to preserve important assets in your community. Membership is very important to us. And the PowerPoint also has a list of resources that you may find useful. And as always, contact us with any questions that you have. And thank you, Mike Jehle, for joining us as our special guest, and Mary Dunn from the SHPO for joining us. Thanks all. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you.